The transport ship shook as it passed through the quantum tunnel. Min pressed his face against the small window and watched space bend around them like twisted metal. Colors that had no names painted the void in impossible shapes. His hands were locked in energy cuffs that burned if he moved too much. First time seeing a dimensional jump, human? The guard was a tall alien with blue skin and too many teeth. His voice sounded like grinding glass. Most prisoners cry when they see where we're going. Min said nothing. He had stopped talking 3 days ago when they first put him in the prison transport. The other prisoners around him came from different worlds. Some had scales, others had fur, and one looked like it was made of living rock. All of them stared at him with curious eyes. None had seen a human before. The ship stopped shaking. Through the window Min saw it. The obsidian nexus hung in empty space like a black diamond. It was huge, bigger than any space station he had ever seen. The prison twisted and turned in ways that hurt his eyes to look at. Parts of it seemed to fold in on themselves. Other sections appeared to be in 2 places at once. Beautiful, isn't it? The blue guard laughed. 200 years and nobody has ever left that place. Well, nobody who wasn't already dead. The transport docked with a loud clang. Guards in black armor came aboard and started moving prisoners in groups. When they reached Min, the lead guard stopped and looked at him for a long time. "So you're the human?" the guard said. His voice came from a speaker in his helmet. "The one who destroyed 3 Zephyrian battle cruisers with mining equipment." He shook his head. "Warden Thexkar wants to meet you personally." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of some dark metal that reflected no light. Strange symbols glowed along the ceiling, casting shadows that moved on their own. Min counted his steps and memorized every turn. It was something his father had taught him when he was young. Always know where you are, Min. Always have a way out. The prison was full of sounds. Metal doors slamming shut. Strange voices speaking in languages he could not understand. Something that might have been crying, but came from a throat that was not human. The air smelled of ozone and fear. They passed through 3 security checkpoints. Each one scanned the prisoners with beams of red light. Guard stations were built into the walls, and Min could see weapons tracking their movement. Everything was automated. Everything was perfect. "The Nexus runs itself," one guard explained to a new prisoner. "The AI learns from every escape attempt. It gets smarter every day. And even if you somehow got past it, you'd still need the Warden's biosignature to open the quantum locks." They entered a vast chamber that took Min's breath away. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above. Cells lined the walls in impossible patterns, some hanging sideways, others upside down. Gravity seemed to work differently in different areas. Prisoners floated in some cells while others stood normally. At the center of it all was the command tower. It rose from the floor like a black spear, covered in lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. At the top, behind walls of transparent metal, Min could see a massive shape moving. "Warden Thexkar," the guard said with respect in his voice. "He's Krillian. 4 arms, psychic powers that can crush your mind from a mile away. He's run this place since it was built. Never lost a single prisoner." They stopped at a processing station. More scans, more questions, more forms filled out by machines. Min was assigned a number, prisoner 847,329. They gave him gray clothes that felt rough against his skin and boots that were too small. "Cell Block Omega," a mechanical voice announced. "Maximum security. No contact with other prisoners except during feeding." The walk to his cell took 20 minutes. They passed hundreds of other cells. Most were dark, but in some Min could see glowing eyes watching him pass. A few prisoners pressed their faces against the transparent barriers and whispered things he could not understand. His cell was small. 3 meters by 3 meters with a thin bed, a waste unit and nothing else. The walls were the same dark metal as the corridors. No windows. No decoration. Just a door that sealed shut with a sound like thunder. Min sat on the bed and looked around his new home. The silence was complete. Even the air recycling system made no noise. He closed his eyes and began to think. The other prisoners thought humans were weak. The guards treated him like just another criminal. Even the warden probably saw him as nothing special. They were all wrong. Min had been watching and listening since the moment he arrived. He had counted steps, memorized layouts, and observed patterns. The prison was impressive, but it had been built by aliens who thought in alien ways. They planned for logical escapes. They expected predictable behavior. They had never dealt with human thinking before. Min lay down on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere high above, Warden Thexkar sat in his tower, confident that his perfect prison could hold anything. The AI systems hummed with electronic satisfaction, certain of their own superiority. None of them understood what they had just locked away. Min smiled in the darkness. His real work was about to begin. The first week passed slowly. Min learned the prison's schedule by listening to the sounds around him. Feeding time came every 12 hours with a soft chime. Guard shifts changed with heavy footsteps in the corridors. The AI systems ran diagnostic checks that made the walls hum for exactly 3 minutes. Other prisoners spent their time sleeping or staring at the walls. Some talked to themselves in languages that sounded like music or grinding metal. A few went completely silent and never moved from their beds. Min was different. He started each day by walking around his small cell exactly 100 times. Then he would do exercises his military training had taught him. Push-ups, sit-ups, stretches that kept his body strong. The routine never changed. "The human has lost his mind," came a voice from the cell next to his. The translation device in the wall made the words sound flat and emotionless. "He walks in circles like a broken machine." The speaker was Crix, a reptilian creature with green scales and yellow eyes. He had been in the Nexus for 15 years after stealing a cargo ship full of rare minerals. During feeding time, when the cell barriers became transparent, prisoners could see and talk to each other. "All humans are crazy," said another voice. This came from Vorth, a being that looked like a walking tree with too many arms. "Their species fights wars over colors of skin and invisible sky gods." Min ignored their comments. He had more important things to focus on. During his second week, he started talking to the maintenance drones that cleaned the corridors. The small robots moved on silent wheels and had sensors that glowed blue when they worked. "Good morning," Min would say when a drone passed his cell. "The air recycling unit in Sector 7 sounds different today. You might want to check it." The drones never responded, but Min noticed they would pause for a moment before continuing their work. After a few days, he saw one actually go to Sector 7 to run diagnostics. "The human talks to machines now," Crix hissed to the other prisoners. "Soon he will forget how to speak to living beings." But Min was learning. The drones operated on simple programming, but they could process helpful information. More importantly, they had access to systems throughout the prison. When he gave them maintenance suggestions, they would log the data and sometimes act on it. Min also spent hours watching the energy patterns that flowed through the walls. During feeding time, when extra power was needed for the food systems, the lights would dim slightly. When the AI ran its diagnostic checks, certain wall panels would glow brighter for a few seconds. He started drawing these patterns on his cell floor using water from his drinking cup. The markings dried quickly, but Min could remember every line and curve. To the other prisoners, it looked like meaningless scratches. "He draws pictures of nothing," Vorth said during one feeding period. "His brain has broken from the isolation." What they didn't understand was that Min was mapping the prison's power grid. Every energy fluctuation told him something about how the Nexus operated. Human brains were built to find patterns in chaos. It was how his species had survived on a dangerous planet for thousands of years. After a month, Min made his first important discovery. The prison's AI systems were incredibly advanced, but they had been designed by aliens who thought in very specific ways. They planned for every logical escape attempt. They expected prisoners to behave predictably. The Zephyrians who built the Nexus were masters of technology, but their minds worked like precise clockwork. They valued order, logic, and careful planning. The Krillians who ran the prison were powerful psychics, but they relied on mental dominance over raw intelligence. None of them understood human thinking. Min realized this during his 6th week when he started rearranging his daily routine. Instead of walking 100 laps, he walked 97 one day, then 103 the next. He changed his exercise times randomly. He drew his energy maps in different corners of the cell. The AI noticed these changes and tried to analyze them. Min could tell because the diagnostic cycle started running more often. The system was working harder to understand his behavior patterns. But there were no patterns to understand. Min was being unpredictable on purpose. "The human grows more strange every day," Crix told the other prisoners. "Yesterday I saw him counting the lights in the ceiling. Today he was tapping the walls with his fingers." They were right that he was counting and tapping, but wrong about why. Min was measuring acoustic response times. Sound traveled differently through different materials. By tapping the walls and listening carefully, he could map the empty spaces behind them. Service tunnels, power conduits, and maintenance shafts that the prison schematics wouldn't show. His human ears could detect frequency differences that most alien species couldn't hear. His brain could process the echo patterns and build a three-dimensional map of the hidden spaces around his cell. During his 3rd month, Min made contact with the cleaning systems. Not the drones but the automated systems that recycled air and water. He started creating small clogs in his cell's drain using threads from his clothes. Nothing serious enough to trigger alarms, just enough to make the cleaning cycles work harder. When maintenance schedules adjusted to handle his cell's problems, Min learned more about the prison's hidden infrastructure. He discovered which systems had redundancy and which were critical single points. The other prisoners watched his strange behavior and whispered among themselves. They thought isolation was driving him insane. They didn't realize he was slowly dismantling their perfect prison from the inside. Min smiled as he lay in his bed that night. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to learn, to adapt, to prepare. The Warden and his AI were about to discover what human unpredictability really meant. 3 months and 2 days. That was how long Min had waited and watched and learned. Now it was time to act. The weekly behavioral assessment always happened at the same time. Every prisoner in the Nexus was scanned and analyzed by the AI systems to check for signs of mental breakdown or escape planning. The computers needed extra processing power for these deep scans, which meant other systems ran slower. Min had been preparing for weeks. He had saved small pieces of his food containers, thin strips of flexible plastic that looked like garbage. He had pulled threads from his clothes and twisted them into strong cord. From the metal rim of his water cup, he had carefully worked loose tiny fragments over many days. To anyone watching, these looked like the meaningless actions of a bored prisoner. The AI had scanned these items hundreds of times and classified them as harmless waste. The assessment began with the familiar hum of scanning beams. Min felt the invisible energy wash over his body as the computers tried to read his mind and emotions. Other prisoners sat quietly in their cells, waiting for the process to finish. Min started his plan. He took the plastic strips and metal fragments and connected them with the twisted threads. His fingers moved quickly, building something that looked like a child's toy. But Min knew exactly what he was creating. The device was tuned to generate interference at very specific frequencies. The behavioral assessment required enormous computer power. The AI was focused entirely on reading the minds and emotions of 800 prisoners. It was not watching for small electronic signals from harmless garbage. Min activated his device. The interference patterns spread through the prison's quantum field stabilizers like ripples in water. The frequencies were chaotic, unpredictable, following no logical pattern that the AI could analyze or counter. They were purely human in their randomness. For 30 seconds nothing happened. Then the first stabilizer failed. The failure cascade began in cell block Omega and spread outward like a virus. Quantum fields that held the prison's impossible geometry in place started to collapse. The Nexus had been built in folded spacetime, and now those folds were coming undone. Alarms screamed throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. The AI systems tried desperately to compensate, but they had never been programmed to handle this kind of failure. The quantum mathematics were breaking down faster than the computers could calculate solutions. Min's cell door, like all the others, was held shut by quantum locks. When the field generators failed, the lock stopped working. He pushed the door open and stepped into chaos. The corridor outside his cell was bending like soft metal. Gravity worked in different directions as the artificial fields collapsed. Other prisoners stumbled out of their cells, screaming in languages Min didn't understand. Some tried to run but couldn't figure out which way was up or down. What is happening? Crix's voice was high with panic. The reptilian alien crawled along the wall, his claws scraping against metal. The walls are moving. Vorth the tree creature was worse off. His heavy body was meant for stable ground, but now the floor tilted at impossible angles. He fell and rolled, his many arms grasping for anything solid. Min moved through the chaos with steady purpose. His human brain could process the shifting geometry better than the alien minds around him. When the floor became a wall, he adjusted. When gravity changed direction, he rolled with it. The prison's architecture was collapsing into itself. Corridors that had been straight now curved in loops. Staircases led to walls instead of other floors. Sections of the facility flickered in and out of existence as the quantum fields failed completely. Min had studied the building's layout for months. Even as it twisted into new shapes, he could still navigate. He knew which passages led toward the command center, even when they no longer looked like passages. Behind him, the other prisoners struggled to survive. Some had been crushed when walls suddenly moved. Others had fallen into spaces that folded shut around them. A few tried to follow Min, but they couldn't adapt to the changing environment fast enough. The AI sent security drones to stop the escaping prisoners. But the machines were designed to work in normal space. In the collapsing quantum field, their navigation systems failed. Most crashed into walls or flew in circles. A few simply vanished when they entered unstable areas. Min reached the central hub of the prison. The command tower still stood in the middle, but now it leaned at a strange angle. The transparent walls around the top were cracked but not broken. Inside, Min could see the massive shape of Warden Thexkar moving frantically between control panels. The tower was surrounded by a moat of twisted metal and broken floor panels. What had once been a straight walkway was now a maze of floating debris. Other prisoners who had made it this far stood at the edge, afraid to cross. Min didn't hesitate. He jumped from piece to piece, using his human balance and reflexes to navigate the dangerous path. When a section of floor tilted under his weight, he leaped to the next piece before falling. When debris shifted unexpectedly, he adjusted his course mid-jump. The tower's entrance was sealed by emergency barriers, but these too depended on quantum fields. As Min approached, the barriers flickered and weakened. He found a gap where two barrier fields overlapped incorrectly and squeezed through. Inside the tower, artificial gravity still worked but barely. Min climbed the stairs toward the command center, each step bringing him closer to Warden Thexkar. Behind him, the obsidian nexus continued to tear itself apart. The command center doors were 3 meters tall and made of the same dark metal as the rest of the prison. They should have been locked, but the quantum systems were failing throughout the nexus. Min pushed them open and stepped inside. Warden Thexkar stood with his back turned, working frantically at a control panel. He was even bigger than Min had expected. Nearly 3 meters tall with 4 muscular arms and gray skin that looked like stone. His head was huge and shaped wrong for a human, with eyes that glowed red in the dim light. "Impressive work, little human," the warden said without turning around. His voice came from inside Min's head, not through his ears. The psychic words felt like cold metal scraping against his brain. "I have been watching your escape. Very creative. Very unpredictable." The command center was a circular room with transparent walls that looked out over the collapsing prison. Control panels lined the walls, displaying holographic screens filled with warnings and error messages. In the center stood a raised platform where the warden could see everything. "You caused this chaos with garbage," Thexkar continued, still working at the controls. "Plastic and metal scraps. The AI never saw it coming because it was too simple. Too stupid. Just like your entire species." Min said nothing. He was looking around the room, studying the structure. The ceiling was supported by 4 main beams. The floor was reinforced metal, but he could see stress points where different sections joined together. His engineering training automatically analyzed weak spots. "I am trying to save my prison," the warden said. "The quantum fields can be restarted, but it will take time. Time I do not have while prisoners run free." He turned around slowly, all 4 arms moving to face Min. "So I will deal with you first." Min felt the psychic attack hit him like a physical blow. It was worse than being punched in the face. The mental pressure tried to crush his thoughts and turn his brain into mush. He stumbled backward, his vision blurring. "Every prisoner breaks the same way," Thexkar said calmly. His glowing eyes focused on Min's face. "First they feel pressure. Then pain. Then their minds simply stop working. Most species last about 10 seconds. But Min was still standing. The psychic assault felt terrible, like someone hammering nails into his skull. But his thoughts remained his own. Human brains worked differently than other species. They operated on neural frequencies that Krillian powers couldn't fully access. "Impossible," the warden snarled. He increased the mental pressure, pouring more psychic energy into the attack. "Your mind should be destroyed." Min gritted his teeth and forced himself to take a step forward. The psychic storm raged around his consciousness, but he could still think, still plan. He had spent months preparing for this moment. "You never studied human engineering, did you?" Min said through the pain. His voice sounded strained but steady. Thexkar's eyes widened with surprise and anger. "Your species is primitive. You barely understand quantum physics." "Maybe," Min replied, taking another step forward. "But we understand structures. We understand stress points and load distribution and how things break." While they had been talking, Min had been moving his hands carefully. He had palmed several small metal fragments from his makeshift tools during the climb up the tower. Now he was placing them against the walls and support beams with tiny magnets he had improvised weeks ago. The warden was so focused on his psychic attack that he didn't notice the small movements. His massive ego made him believe that raw power was all he needed to win. "You think your primitive tricks can defeat me?" Thexkar roared. The psychic pressure increased again, making Min's ears bleed. "I have crushed the minds of warriors and criminals for 2 centuries. "That's your problem," Min gasped. You always use the same approach. Always trust your power. Never adapt to new situations. The metal fragments Min had placed were not weapons. They were shaped charges, built from the same materials he had used to collapse the quantum fields. But these were tuned to different frequencies that would make metal vibrate at exactly the wrong resonance. Min triggered the charges. The command center filled with a high-pitched whine as the metal beams began to vibrate. The sound was barely audible, but the structural damage was immediate. Stress fractures appeared in the support columns. The reinforced floor plates started to separate at their joints. What have you done? Thexkar demanded. His psychic attack faltered as he realized something was wrong. Simple physics, Min said. Every structure has a resonant frequency. Hit it just right and it falls apart. He smiled through the blood running down his face. You were so busy trying to crush my mind, you forgot to watch what my hands were doing. The ceiling began to sag. One of the main support beams cracked with a sound like thunder. Thexkar looked up in horror as his perfect command center started to collapse around him. Impossible, the Warden screamed. The Nexus cannot be destroyed. A section of the ceiling fell directly onto Thexkar's head. The massive Krillian tried to dodge, but his size worked against him in the confined space. The metal beam struck him down, and his psychic screams echoed through the dying prison. Min stood over the Warden's body as dust and debris settled around them. The command center was ruined, but he had what he needed. The bioneural access key that would open every lock in the facility. He looked at Thexkar's crushed skull and began the grim work of claiming his prize. Min knelt beside the Warden's body and did what had to be done. The bioneural access key was embedded deep in Thexkar's skull, connected to brain tissue that still pulsed with dying electrical signals. He used a sharp piece of metal debris to carefully extract what he needed. The head was heavy and awkward to carry, but it was his ticket out. Every lock in the prison would recognize the Warden's biosignature. Even in death, Thexkar's neural patterns remained active for several hours. The command center shuddered around him. More ceiling panels fell as the building structure continued to fail. Through the cracked transparent walls, Min could see the rest of the Nexus tearing itself apart. Entire sections of the prison flickered in and out of existence. Others twisted into impossible shapes before collapsing completely. He had to move fast. Min grabbed the Warden's head and ran for the stairs. The tower was tilting now, and gravity pulled him toward one wall as he descended. He used his free hand to steady himself against the railings, jumping over gaps where the stairs had broken away. On the 5th level down he encountered other prisoners who had made it this far. A group of aliens from different worlds huddled together near a damaged wall. They stared at him with wide eyes when they saw what he was carrying. The human killed Thexkar, one of them whispered in the common tongue. He cut off the Warden's head. Impossible, said another. No one can defeat a Krillian psychic. Min pushed past them without stopping. The prison is collapsing, he called back. Find shelter or find an exit. Don't just stand there. But they were too shocked to move. In their minds, killing the Warden was more impossible than escaping the Nexus itself. They watched Min disappear down the stairs, still unable to believe what they had seen. The bottom of the tower was flooded with sparking electrical systems and twisted metal. The floor had buckled upward in several places, creating a maze of obstacles. Min climbed over broken control panels and squeezed through gaps in the debris. He reached the main corridor and started toward the quantum tunnel entrance. The journey that had taken 20 minutes during his arrival now became a nightmare run through a dying building. Walls shifted without warning. Floors became ceilings. Sections of the corridor simply weren't there anymore. Min's human adaptability kept him alive. When the path ahead vanished, he found another route. When gravity changed direction, he rolled with it. When debris fell from above, he dodged and kept running. Other prisoners were not so lucky. Min passed bodies crushed by falling metal. He saw aliens trapped in spaces that had folded shut around them. Some called for help, but he couldn't stop. The prison was dying, and he had maybe minutes before it took him with it. The quantum tunnel entrance was protected by 3 security checkpoints. Under normal conditions, these would have been impossible to pass. But nothing was normal now. The first checkpoint flickered with dying power, its weapon systems offline. Min pressed the Warden's head against the bioscanner. Even damaged, the system recognized Thexkar's neural signature. The barriers dropped with mechanical clicks. The second checkpoint was more difficult. The scanner was working, but the doorway had been twisted out of shape by the building's collapse. Min had to squeeze through a gap barely wide enough for his shoulders, dragging the head behind him. At the third checkpoint he found a group of security guards trying to maintain order. They were alien species Min didn't recognize with strange armor and energy weapons. When they saw him approaching with the warden's head, they raised their guns. "Stop, prisoner," the lead guard shouted. "Return to your cell immediately." Min held up the head so they could see the bioneural access ports clearly. "The warden is dead," he said calmly. "The prison is collapsing. You can either shoot me or get out of my way." The guards looked at each other uncertainly. They had been trained to follow the warden's orders, but the warden was obviously beyond giving orders. The building shook again and more debris fell from the ceiling. "Let him pass," one guard said finally. "This place is finished anyway." They stepped aside and Min walked through the final checkpoint. The quantum tunnel entrance was just ahead, but it was flickering like a dying light bulb. The dimensional portal was losing stability as the prison's power systems failed. Min ran the last 50 meters and dove through the tunnel just as it collapsed behind him. The journey through folded space felt like being turned inside out and stretched across infinity. Colors that shouldn't exist painted impossible shapes in the void around him. Then he was through. Min tumbled out of the quantum tunnel and landed hard on solid ground. Real ground under a real sky with real stars. He was on Kepler 442b, on the surface of the planet where the Nexus had been anchored. Above him, the Zephyrian security fleet waited in perfect formation. Dozens of warships hung motionless in the atmosphere, their crews watching for any sign of trouble from the prison. They got more trouble than they expected. Min stood up slowly, still holding Thexkar's head. He walked toward the nearest ship, knowing they could see him clearly on their sensors. Behind him, the quantum tunnel entrance sparked and died, cutting off all connection to the pocket dimension where the Obsidian Nexus had existed. In the command ships above, alien officers stared at their screens in disbelief. Someone was walking out of the most secure prison in known space. Someone was carrying the warden's head like a trophy. "Impossible," the fleet commander whispered. "No one escapes the Nexus." Word of Min's escape spread across the galaxy within hours. In criminal hideouts and government halls, the whispers began immediately. The humans were not like other species. They could break the unbreakable. They could do the impossible. Min vanished into the cosmic underground before the security forces could react. But his legend remained, growing with each telling. The galaxy had learned a new truth about humanity, and that knowledge would change everything. The humans were coming.